Hello, what's up guys, I'm Kyle from KGR, and behind me I have a Switch 2, a PS5, an Xbox Series S, and below me is a PC. For the longest time I was always Nintendo and PlayStation, but this generation Microsoft was acquiring a lot of developers, so FOMO kicked in. I bought an Xbox and I wanted to make sure I didn't miss out on anything. So now that I've had experience with all these consoles as well as a PC, I want to give you my hopefully non-biased thoughts on each of them. But before I get into my opinions, I want to tell you what kind of gamer I am, because I want to say I'm fairly casual for the most part. With me working a full-time job as well as doing YouTube, I don't really have as much time as I used to play games. So any free time that I have is typically going toward filming or editing. But if a new game comes out, I'll make time for it because I get excited for these new games. I play mostly platformers. I'll step outside sometimes, like with Naughty Dog or Spider-Man games, maybe GTA when that comes out. I'll play the Naruto Storm games as my fighter, I guess. But for the most part, it's typically like platformers, for the most part. I don't play shooters. I don't play sports games. I don't play any of the Ubisoft games except for like Rayman. Like I have a small window of what I like. However, I am very enthused in the industry, so like I try to keep up with all the news and everything like that. Like it very much catches my interest. It's just I don't have time, and I'm also very picky. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about the newest system out of the three, the Switch 2. Now, my opinion is going to mostly reflect on the original Switch, but I will give you my 2 cents on how I feel about the Switch 2, because the thing's only a few months old, but I do have a few things I want to say. Now, I don't care if you're a PlayStation guy, an Xbox guy, or a PC guy. More often than not, you're going to have a Switch on the side because the exclusives are that good. And I feel it's the most social system out of all three, because it has the best couch co-op stuff or shared screen gameplay, whatever you want to call it. Because if you go to a party and they're like, oh, let's play some games, what are you going to play? Split screen Call of Duty? Halo? No! You're going to play Mario Kart, Smash, or Mario Party. And plus, everyone just loves Pokemon too. But although I think the Switch is the most fun system out of the big three, the Switch in particular feels like the most corporate out of the three. It screams, no fun. You want themes? No. You want background music? No. You want Netflix? No. It is meant to mostly play games, and that's mostly it. Even though it's the weakest out of the three systems, still the most successful. But the fact that the Switch even did well is a miracle, to be honest. Because they launched the Wii U, no one bought it except for me and a few other people, and then Nintendo had the audacity and say, alright, plan B. We're gonna release a system, not in the holiday season. We're gonna release a system with no backwards compatibility. We're gonna make the accessories little expensive, and we're gonna launch the thing with little to no games. On paper, that just screams disaster, but the marketing was brilliant, and that's why it succeeded. And then good games came out within the first year. I think almost every month at that point there was always a good big game coming out for the Switch, and it had an excellent first start despite it having such a disadvantage. And now it's one of Nintendo's most sold platforms, if not the most sold platform. So now that Switch 2's coming out, it has become the most controversial system that Nintendo's probably put out. But before I get into my 2 cents on the Switch 2, let's talk about the OG Switch. This is my day one Switch. This thing somehow still works. The fan grinds a little bit, but that's okay. It still functions, doesn't overheat or anything. When this thing was first revealed, I thought the design of this was so sleek because I was a big fan of the Wii U. So then I saw the Joy-Cons and I'm like, wow, this is a pretty neat concept. I like this. Then I got my hands on it and then I'm like, I'd rather have a Switch Pro controller, and never really looked back. I mainly don't like how delicate these Joy-Cons are. I don't like that these things drift so easily. I don't like the fact that the little latch on here wears out so easily because it's made out of plastic. So if you're a little kid who is rough on your Switch and you're in the back of the bus and you go over a big bump, that thing is just gonna fall out. Thankfully, the Switch 2 feels like a perfected Switch. The Joy-Cons feel bigger, much better. The magnetic Joy-Cons is just a fun fidget toy to play with, to be completely honest. And the Switch 2 Pro Controller feels so much better, because the Switch Pro Controller felt amazing to a lot of people, probably some people's favorite controller. But I didn't like the D-pad. I didn't like the fact that I could accidentally put in diagonal inputs, and you could press the whole D-pad down. It does not scream Nintendo quality. So when the Switch 2 Pro Controller came out, the sticks felt even better. The fact that they just glide. The stick itself doesn't even touch the ring. It's smooth as butter. The snapback isn't very great, so it's not good for competitive fighters. But the D-pad, better. It's still technically possible to do accidental diagonal inputs, but it's not as bad from what I noticed, but I didn't really thoroughly test it that hard yet, because the thing's only a few months old. But out of the big three, all of them do their online subscriptions differently. Nintendo, objectively, is kind of the worst, but I don't play online games all that much. The only online game I really play is Mario Kart, and that's it. So I can't really say my experience on all the other platforms, and I can't tell you why it's the worst. It's just regarded as the worst. However, depending on your tier of your subscription, you can have legacy content. And even though Nintendo's whole online experience is technically the worst, I love its legacy content. It's not backwards compatibility, but the ability to play older games so much more. Because of the fact that you can get controllers based on these older systems and play these games almost as authentically as possible. Would I prefer having OG systems? Absolutely. Would I rather have Virtual Console? I miss the idea of it, but having a subscription to have access to all these games to me is just so much better. So as someone who never owned a 64, I had a cousin who had one, and we used to play it at my grandma's house. So now that I can just grab a 64 controller, plug in my Switch 2 into my 4K TV, and play Pokemon Stadium, and it looks even better than how it did when we were younger, that's perfect. But when we go more into the Switch 2, it becomes one of the most controversial systems because of the bad stigma that it has already, whether it be game key cards, how easily your account could get banned or your console can get bricked, allegedly. And some people harp on the idea that you don't truly own your games. When it comes to game key cards, I'll fully admit, this is not my console of choice whenever I buy multi-platform games. I would rather get it somewhere else so I have that better graphical fidelity. However, if there's a game that I do want to take on the go, I will buy it again on the Switch so I can purely take it on the go. But I buy them digitally because of the fact I'm only doing it in handheld, so I might as well have that digital convenience without lugging around a lot of cartridges. So the fact that the game key card is like the worst. It's either you get a cartridge and you save space on your system, you just gotta lug a cartridge around, or buy a game digitally so you don't have to carry a cartridge around, but it takes up more space on your system. It's the worst out of them, is because you have to lug a cartridge around, and it takes up storage on your system. At that point, I might as well just buy the games digitally. I will buy the Nintendo branded games that are like fully on the cartridge physically, just like a save space as well as have something on the shelf to show off. But I get why they made game key cards. I just don't like them. But when it comes to how easily you get banned, it's very few and far between. Because when we think of the Twinklink fiasco, someone named their account and it got banned. As far as I'm aware, that's like the only report I heard about that. When it comes to buying a used cartridge and possibly getting banned because someone may have backed it up and now there's 2 master keys for that cartridge, so they end up banning the wrong person. Again, I only know of one instance, no more than 5. But the fact that this fear is there is because of Nintendo's stupid policies, and that's their own fault. They worked so hard to regenerate the reputation for Nintendo as a company with the original Switch, and now there's so much fear-mongering happening with the Switch 2 that is all completely Nintendo's fault. And also the internet just being a giant echo chamber. But it still struck fear into a decent amount of Nintendo fans. But for the casual people who stay away from the internet for the most part, yeah, they want a Switch 2. Because it's a Switch 2! But with Mario Kart 8 being $80, I still don't stand behind that. I think it's not worth the price. Maybe later down the line, maybe, but like, right now it's not worth it. No way. But I will end things on a bright note. If a family could only get one console, and they don't care about exclusives, like, I don't know, Last of Us, Halo, Spider-Man, or anything like that, and they just want to play their annual games like their Call of Madden 2Ks, the fact that the Switch 2 is getting that, you can almost get away with getting just a Switch 2 and still play most of the games you want to play. It's pretty impressive. The GameCube Online right now is empty. But if they add Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, the Switch 2 will hands down be my favorite system of all time. Because if I can play most of my top 10 favorite games of all time on a Switch, yeah, that's my favorite. But now, with all that out of the way, let's move on to PlayStation. This is my day one PS5 that hasn't had any issues, thankfully. Now, this is my console of choice. When I get a multi-platform game, this is what I'm playing it on. But I gotta say, this thing's ugly. Like, did you ever see those videos from, like, what, 2008, 2009? Of, like, the Xbox 720, the PS4, the Wii 2 that looks like a phone. That was all edited in Windows Movie Maker, and the background music is either Bodies or Dreamscape. Yeah, this looks like one of those just actually brought to life. It sure has a futuristic look to it that's ginormous. Thankfully the slim one does slim it down a little bit, but like, still ridiculously big. But the controller also looks nice. It's also kind of futuristic, I guess. But it does a lot of good stuff. I like the haptic feedback, especially in the triggers. I like the resistance on those. Like, everything on this controller feels fantastic. But the PS5 is essentially a perfected PS4. But that said, when I first had my PS4, like at launch, I wasn't a huge fan of it. Because for the longest time, it was just a bunch of ports, and then one more sequel out of like previous franchises from previous consoles. But then later we got some original content that was fantastic. But for the first few years I hated my PS4 and I preferred my Wii U, and I had a bigger Wii U collection than PS4 games. But later down the line, some of my top 10 games of all time came out on PS4. And when it comes to the online subscriptions, I pay the most with the PS5 because of the premium tier, where you can have a whole library of games as well as access to retro games if you want. I like how they do their tiers, and I like how you can do them in different months or do a whole year, whatever. I don't like how expensive it is now. That's stupid, but I like what they provide. And as someone who owns two PS5s, one for the game room, one for the living room, so both me and my fiance could also play games. Although I collect physically, for the most part, because of having the PS Plus and having that big digital library, when a game is on there that I want to play, being able to just download the games through my phone whenever, like to my console of choice, is so sick. I love that. When it comes to the whole physical versus digital, that's gonna be a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But I think the biggest flaw with the PS5 right now is the fact that a good chunk of people don't feel like they have to upgrade to the PS5. Sure, console-wise, the PS5 does have a lot of exclusive experiences on it. You can get a majority of the games on PC now, which is a topic we can get on to a little bit later. But the biggest flaw with the PS5 is the fact that there's so many games that are also ported to PS4, because there's always going to be a cross-generational gap where they'll still release things on PS4 just so they can like appeal to those people. But for the most part, it didn't feel like the generation fully started, except when we got releases like Spider-Man 2, Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3. And even then, a lot of the sequels that we got from the PS4 generation to PS5 were not only still playable on PS4, but for the most part, from what I've been hearing, that they're just kind of okay. They're not as mind-blowing as the first game. Hot take, I didn't like Spider-Man 2 all that much. I thought it was pretty mid. It was pretty, but the gameplay felt like such a downgrade. And that's a whole nother tangent I can go on for another day. If you want me to do a YouTube short on that, I'll do it. But the fact that it's like just now starting to feel like the generation's just starting, we're already halfway through the thing's life cycle. We're going into year 5 or year 6 here pretty soon. But the fact that the console generation's just feeling like it's just starting, like this system's already been out for almost 5 years now, and we're already hearing rumors about the PlayStation 6, both the standard one as well as the portable one. It kind of kills the excitement of this console. And I didn't feel a need to buy a PS5 Pro because what games am I going to play that's going to fully take advantage of it and make it worth that $700 price tag that I'm probably hardly going to play anyway? Now, am I happy I bought this thing? Absolutely. And would I have been miserable not having this thing as an adult? Absolutely. If the camera angle looks slightly different, the battery died. I'm sorry. But anyway, back when I was in high school, I couldn't afford a PS3 immediately, so I stuck with my PS2 for a while. And it kind of feels like that again. Like, let's pretend I was in high school and I couldn't upgrade to a PS5 because the thing was so expensive. I feel like I probably wouldn't have missed out on much, to be completely honest. The only games that I really had to upgrade to a PS5 for was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Astro Bot. Spider-Man 2, I would have been upset that I couldn't play that immediately, and of course the marketing would make me like, oh, I want it so bad. But now that I've experienced it, and I'm like, the game was alright. I didn't really feel like I missed out on much, to be honest. Plus, it was a busy week. It was that, a new Sonic game, and a new Mario game. The Mario game was the best out of the three. Yeah, I'm looking at my collection right now for my PS5 games. And the only games that are, like, exclusive to it are Astro Bot, Spider-Man 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Everything else I could play on PS4. But keep in mind, I'm happy that I bought this thing. I love this thing. And when I was playing Crash Bandicoot 4 on PS4, those awful load times made me thinking, man, I can't wait to have this thing with an SSD in it. So, I'm happy. As an enthusiast, I'm happy I bought a PS5. And do I wish I had a PS5 Pro? But because of the exclusives on this thing, the graphical fidelity, and overall just the popularity of PlayStation in general, there's a reason that most gamers go to this guy. When it comes to its legacy subscription service, like when it comes to like playing like older games, the PlayStation's gonna be my least favorite due to the lack of variety there. Like, people look at it now and be like, oh no, like, it's decent. Like, there's a decent amount of games on here that I like. But I'm also comparing it to what we had on, like, PS3. Especially PS1 games. Sure, you can have rewind features. You have better looking emulation. You have trophies now. That's also pretty awesome. However, the amount of games that were originally on PS3 with the PS1 backwards compatibility, like, with that PlayStation Store, I wish most of that was here on PS5, even without trophy support. Like, give me my Digimon, give me my retro Crash Bandicoot games and Spyro games, like, give me everything that's also still available, by the way, on PS3. I wish this thing could play PS3 games natively. I'm somewhat confident that the hardware is powerful enough to emulate it properly, but I don't know. I'm not an engineer. But to be honest, there's only like a handful of games on PS3 that I'd want to play anyway, because everything else is on PS4 ported. But there is a part of me that does wish, like, what if this thing could natively play all PS1, 2, 3, 4 games? What if this thing could play PT? Which, by the way, my PS4 back here, I'm not sure you can see it, but my PS4 back there still has PT installed on it. So that's why I keep it. Plus, it's just a good display. But anyway, I'm very thankful that I have PT still. But if they could do all of this, this would hands down be my favorite system. But because I don't have that, I have this, as well as a backwards compatible PS3 in the living room. So I can play all my generations of games if I really want to. If I want to play PT, I'll plug into PS4 if I really need to. There's not much left I have to say about the PS5. It's a great system. I love this thing, but it kind of felt like the generation never really started, and now that it feels like it finally did, we're almost ready to move on to the PlayStation 6. But I'll get into the idea of that much later into the video. But now, let's talk about Xbox. And this is the Xbox Series S. I got this guy within the first year of it being released, but when this thing was $300, or sometimes even less if it was on a sale. This thing was such a good bang for your buck. If you got this, let's say for like 200, 250 bucks, and then you got Game Pass, oh my god, this thing was awesome. When it comes to backwards compatibility, this thing does it the best. And also, If you want to tinker with it, having the ability of dev mode be available for you, which is something that I took advantage of, kinda, that was awesome. I loved this thing for that. I bought this thing to turn it into an N64 emulation machine, and also I bought Sonic Unleashed on it. Xbox is a great Sonic machine, by the way. This system was perfect for anybody that was on a budget. If you couldn't afford the Series X, and you had this thing, just like, even good for portability, to be honest, because how small this thing is. But on a budget, for as cheap as this thing was, as well as Game Pass being an option, you didn't miss out on any of the new games. It was pretty sick. Or at least the new Microsoft Studios, or Xbox Studios, I should say, games. As much as I love PlayStation, the value in this thing was incredible. But as someone who doesn't use Game Pass, and now the N64 games are on the Switch, and Sonic Unleashed is on PC now, I have no reason to own this thing. I also have Rare Replay and the Halo Master Chief Collection that somebody gifted me. But the only thing that's missing on there that I really want to play, that's like only on the Rare compilation, is Conker's Bad Fur Day. And it's only a matter of time till that hops on Switch anyway. So as someone who doesn't pay for Game Pass, and pretty much in the situation that I'm in, I have no need for this thing. In fact, I'm actually half debating on just getting rid of it. I held on to it for as long as I did, strictly to make this video. And out of the big three, the controller, I get why people like it, but it is the most archaic out of the three. The fact that it still has the sticks that grind on like the inner circle on this, not a fan of that. The fact that it still uses the rumble motors compared to haptic feedbacks that you can see on the other competition, not a fan of that. The fact that it uses AA batteries, I think their argument was, so like when the lithium battery dies out, like you're not completely out of a controller. The battery is not going to be the first thing to go on these controllers. It's the sticks. The fact that I can use a GameCube controller from 2001 and still have no stick drift, but a PS5 controller can die within a year, that's unacceptable. That's depressing. But yeah, out of the big three, I get why people like this controller. I like the layout of it, but I also have that on Switch. So therefore, unfortunately, this is my least favorite out of the three. But I do love this thing's backwards compatibility, though. Like, I love the fact that older games can get boosts, whether it be in performance or resolution, or even both sometimes. Like, I love that for this thing. Now, if this thing was in my living room, maybe I'd use it more. But since it's in the game room, I have no need to use this thing. Because I can use it any other game, on any other platform. But the biggest thing that I love about Xbox as a brand is how much Xbox as a whole pushed the industry forward. When it came to online multiplayer, they set the standard with Halo on the original Xbox and made it a little bit more accessible. And then the 360 as a whole just completely grabbed a casual market and made online multiplayer and online subscriptions like the go-to. It set this, like, it made it a new standard in the whole industry. It was perfect. But when Xbox One came out and their whole thing about being like mostly a digital future and like other stuff like that, they were ahead of the time because it's the digital future is kind of like how they envisioned it back then. It's kind of how it is now almost, except for the whole used game thing. That was stupid. But then they also set the standard of, okay, you can subscribe to our service for this much a month and you have a library of games to play with. So PlayStation followed suit, and again, now it's starting to become a little bit of a standard because even other companies are starting to do it now. Now Xbox is trying to do the Xbox Everywhere campaign. So it's not just the fact that you can stream these games to, like, I don't know, your TV, your Fire Stick, your phone, which I don't see becoming a very, what's the word I'm looking for, casually accepted thing. That's going to be very much an enthusiast thing. Like, not many people are going to really take advantage of that. But the fact that Microsoft is also publishing games on PlayStation, kind of weird. Definitely a weird timeline we live in. But also the fact that Microsoft now owns Crash Bandicoot. I hate that. As someone who grew up with Crash Bandicoot since I was a kid, I don't like that. But now I feel the next thing that Xbox is going to do outside of like their games being everywhere is the rumor, the possibility that the next generation Xbox is going to be able to get Steam on there. So becoming the most accessible. The fact that almost every game can be in one box. Because that's something that people dreamt up for a long time, and we're getting very close to that reality, except for Nintendo. Nintendo doesn't like that idea. But it's getting to a point where it's like, what box do you choose? You either get the Game Pass box, or the God of War box, or Last of Us box, or whatever you want to call that thing, the Spider-Man box. But that mostly wraps up my thoughts on the Xbox. Like, they set a lot of standards. Xbox definitely does push the industry forward, but as someone who doesn't pay for Game Pass, Xbox is not for me. But I get why people love it. So to finish off my thoughts on the video, let's talk about how I feel about the industry as a whole. Now all those consoles are put away. The industry as a whole kind of scares me now. With the recent price hikes of the Xbox as well as the older Switch systems and current accessories, it has me scared of how much this next generation is going to cost. If an Xbox Series X right now costs $600, a PS5 Pro costs $700, let's pretend the next generation Xbox and PlayStation cost $800 more or less. It's gonna feel like the PS3 generation all over again, where it kind of outpriced the average consumer. Enthusiasts will still definitely love it, for sure, but the casual market, which is honestly the biggest audience out of the two, they're gonna be at a point where how they currently feel about PS4 versus PS5. These consoles are way too expensive, and the games that I want to play are still on my system. What's the point of me upgrading? And I feel if they completely cut away PS5 support and just move strictly to PlayStation 6, if the consoles themselves are way too expensive for the average consumer, I'm afraid that there might be another video game crash. Because with the state of the industry, of a game being developed and corporate, like the publishers are pushing these developers to rush out these games as soon as possible, only for the game to come out terribly because of the corporate push and pressure, only for the developers to get punished and not the developers and all of the corporate overhead. It's a scary industry of like, if your game doesn't succeed, you will lose your job. And these games take so long to make now. It's literally a once, maybe two titles in a franchise within a console generation, and that's it. But right now, this industry is extremely money hungry, whether it be the idea of these subscription services, which I'm a fan of, they're fine. The microtransactions, if they're just cosmetics, they're fine. But I don't like the fact that these controllers fail so easily, and how expensive these controllers are. And I can only imagine how much more expensive it's going to get into the future. Now, I have multiple controllers. I have all these systems. I have multiples of some of these systems. Like, it's the fact that I can have a PS2 controller from 2000 still work, and my PS5 is gonna drift faster than that thing. It makes you wonder what the shape of the industry is gonna be like in 5 to 10 years, because this is something that's always constantly evolving and changing. But it's only a matter of time until the bubble bursts. Although I don't have much of an issue affording these new consoles or these new games or anything like that, not everybody is in a position that I'm in. And even then, I'm not all that rich. Like, I still have limits. I just have a YouTube channel that's successful enough to fund my hobbies. I'm lucky. But I feel like when it comes to a corporate level, I feel like Nintendo's the only one is like kind of doing it right, where like they put out a decent amount of games in a good amount of time. And when it comes to like how CEOs at Nintendo are paid versus how Bobby Kotick of Activision's paid is night and day. I feel like the third-party developers are like the most money hungry, and maybe Sony the same way. Xbox is all about surviving and pushing some type of services and subscriptions, because that's how they succeed really well with Microsoft as a whole. But again, even though Xbox is in last place, they do push the industry forward. So like, I do respect Xbox for that. But I'm still very much scared of where this industry is going to go. I like how Nintendo doesn't really punish their developers all that much. So with all that said, that mostly wraps up on how I feel about gaming as a whole. Right now, my hobbies mostly consist of toy collecting. That's where most of my money goes right now. But as someone who casually enjoys video games, I'm very much scared for the future. And even though I'm more of a PlayStation and Nintendo fan, I like gaming as a whole. But I'm scared that it's going to outprice the average consumer. And the bubble's going to burst. And maybe there might be another video game crash. I don't know. But how do you feel? What do you think of the gaming industry as a whole? What is your favorite system out of the three? If I had to pick my favorite out of the three, again, that really depends if I get Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 on the Switch 2. If I can get that, Switch 2 will be my favorite, hands down. But until then, PS5's my main platform of choice, but Nintendo games are super good. But anyway, thank you for watching. If you're new and you like what you saw, you know what to do. The description's gonna have my link tree if you want to follow me on anything. And I hope I didn't make a lot of people angry. But it's the internet. Someone's gonna get angry. But anyway, thank you for watching. I love you guys to death. And I'll see y'all in the next one. So peace.